My wife and I are third generation foster parents. So my parents fostered and their parents fostered. Some of the most challenging, difficult moments and experiences in my life were a direct result of the fact that we fostered. And yet, for every difficult moment, I think there were about 99 other moments that I watched my parents day in and day out just grind with unconditional love for these kids, continuing to show up with compassion, with perseverance. And so even though it was a difficult experience growing up, I remember thinking, I'm going to do that someday. Like, I want that to be part of my story too. So when my wife and I started fostering, I was a pastor of a church in the Bay Area, and we invited our small community to join us in moving towards kids and families in crisis. And as we did that, we began to build relationships with social workers in the Bay Area. And at one point, a social worker sat down with me and she said, Philip, like, this is cool. We like working with your church. She said, but the reality is right now, there are far more kids coming into foster care than we have homes that are ready to help them. And she said, this crisis we're in is just honestly bigger than your church. She said, would you guys create a faith alliance of churches to help us raise up more foster families so we could have more than enough homes for kids? And so we said yes, and we started what we call today Foster the City. And that's now a coalition of more than 200 churches that are linking arms, working together to raise up foster families so we can help, again, every kid that's coming into foster care have a loving, stable home. One of the kiddos that we brought into our home, her name was Karina. She came in our home when she was 7 years old, and I just have some incredible memories of the 7 months that we got to be a part of her story. I remember the way that she interacted and built a relationship with and laughed with my kids, my biological kids. I also remember some of the challenges. Karina came into our home having experienced some pretty difficult things in her young life. And as a result of that, she came in and had some pretty significant needs, some pretty significant challenges. And often throughout that 7 months, my wife and I just felt like we could not meet her needs. Like, we just couldn't help her in that season that she was in, and it just broke our heart. And throughout the 7 months, we're like, man, did we hear God correctly on this yes, bringing this little girl into our home? Because we constantly felt like we were failing her. We constantly felt like what we had to offer wasn't enough. What compounded this, of course, was the fact that, like, here I am, I'm leading Foster the City. I'm standing in front of congregations, inviting people to join us and moving towards vulnerable kids. And I have a vulnerable kid in my own home that I felt like I was failing. It even got to the place where she had to leave our home after 7 months, and it broke our hearts. It broke her heart. I remember just weeping with my friends, just feeling like we had utterly failed this sweet girl. It was one of the greatest defeats and failures of my life. So eventually, Karina was restored back to her birth family. She went back home to live with her mom. But while she was still in our house, we were taking Karina to a visit with her biological mom. That's part of foster care, is keeping the kids connected with their biological family. So we dropped Karina off for a visit for a couple hours, and while we were waiting, we drove down the street to have dinner at a restaurant, had dinner, came out to the parking lot, got to our car, and we saw that our tires had been slashed. And so we called a friend of ours. Her name is Jean. She's one of our support friends. And we said, Jean, is there any way that you could go down and you could pick up Karina? Our tires have been slashed. And so she said, of course, dropped what she was doing, drove down, picked up Karina. And while she was there, she got into a conversation with Karina's biological mom. Her mom's name is Tracy. So Jean and Tracy got into this conversation, and what sparked there was this friendship. Even after Karina went back home to go live with her mom, this friendship between Jean and Tracy continued. And at one point, Jean invited Tracy, saying, hey, you should come and be a part of our church. You should come and check this out. You know, you guys are kind of rebuilding things as a family. Come and find some community and some support as a family. And Tracy said yes. And so for the last 6 years, Tracy and Karina have been a part of our church family. And after a couple of years, Tracy placed her faith in Jesus, and we got a chance to see her be baptized at our church on Easter Sunday. And then a few years after that, just recently, in fact, I got a message from Tracy, and she said, hey, Philip, guess what? Karina has placed her faith in Jesus, and she's asking us to be baptized. And we wondered if you'd be the one to be able to do that. In the moments leading up to the time when we were going to baptize Karina, we were standing outside, the tubs are in front of us. I got to see Jean, the support friend, standing right next to Tracy, Karina's mom, and Jean has her arm around Tracy. And just thinking back about those 7 months at Karina's in our home, when we felt like we had absolutely failed this little girl and everything had come crashing down, to be able to be in that moment with Jean having her arms around her, being able to celebrate life and healing and hope and community. It was one of the most beautiful moments for me to just think, look what God can do. Look what God can do in the midst of seeming defeat. Look what he can bring about.